Good morning and God bless. Welcome to the Front Page Saturday Town Hall Edition. I'm Dominique DiPrima. This show right here put together as a response initially to the COVID-19 pandemic, to protest, to the opportunity for change, and of course, our election seeks to bring you up-to-date information on all of those topics and more. It is a town hall every Saturday from 8 to 10. Today, we take on the propositions. Call it a cheat sheet, call it a shortcut, call it a symposium, call it what you like. We've got some voices on the left and on the right to give you your own chance to make up your own mind about what is going on. Now, you know that I'm on the air Monday through Friday from 4:30 to 6 a.m. During the week, and we constantly talk about this. If you're still confused, you can show up then. And typically, I will give more my own opinion in that kind of a forum. Right now, I want to hear from our scholars and scholars, activists who will be on the phone. And of course, you, 520-KJLH, 520-5554. So pleased to bring into the school. It is a school kind of today. Little yellow pain to start off our first lesson. A policy shaper, a published scholar. His work has helped advance activist-led movements and policy change around issues of racial, economic, and social justice. He serves as the founding director of the UCLA Black Policy Project, head of the Public Policy Division for the $1 Million Hoods Project, and director of public policy for the UCLA Ralph J. Bunche Center. Isaac Bryan, good morning.
Good morning, Dominique. How you doing today?
I'm blessed. It's great to hear your voice. I'm going to start off with what we call a nice softball question. What's the most important issue on this ballot to you in November?
The most important issue on the ballot for me this November is justice, quite frankly. And there's a number of statewide ballot measures and propositions that speak to the need for justice. But then locally, we have Measure J, which is a measure directly for community investment in alternatives to incarceration and other forms of healing and care that really speak to kind of the movement of this year for me. So Measure J here locally in LA County is the most important thing on the ballot in my mind.
And we will break that down. Actually would love to learn more about that. I do know some, but certainly your role in that makes you a unique person who can answer some questions about that. Also joining us right now, he's a filmmaker. He does documentary films. He has done documentaries on all kinds of different topics regarding the justice system, education, and more. And he's also running for Congress. Earl Weber, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And your top, what you would call your top issue for November 2020 in terms of these propositions and such.
I believe that right now California is being very anti-business, and the anti-business climate and the propositions that are clamping down on businesses here in California will only drive more people out of California, further imperiling more Californians who are left behind here in California to fend for themselves. Okay,
can you be specific? Like just pick one that you think is anti-business?
Prop 15 is
of course.
Is the one that is digging in to reassess the Prop 13, which has been in existence for about 40 years at this point. Prop 13 has been protecting California taxpayers for half a century, and it is important for us to protect our property owners, both commercial and residential.
Right, which of course we know Prop 15 doesn't have anything to do with residential owners, but you feel like it's anti-business.
It is anti-business, and one of the things I need to remind people of is that California businesses are run by people. So you can be pro-people all day long, but if your pro-people stance is so strong that it's anti-business, you have to remind yourself that these businesses are run by people.
Absolutely understood. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go through each. No. I just wanted to get you guys to each give sort of a basic opening statement about your I want to make sure we have time to go through the whole ballot. And what I find typically when I do these shows is we kind of get stuck on one, and then, there's a bunch of them and we never get through the whole thing. So I am going to push the pace a little bit here. But don't worry, Mr. Weber, we will talk more about 15. Certainly it is a super important ballot measure. So let's start at the top, Proposition 14. This is about what says it authorizes $5.5 billion in state general obligation funds, bonds to fund grants from the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. This is one that I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% clear on where I am. I have a feeling I might be after this. It's about putting our money, a taxpayer's money, into research for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke, epilepsy, and other central nervous system diseases and conditions. Representing the right wing, I guess you could say, the Republican side of the coin. Go ahead, Errol Weber. What is your take on Prop 14?
On Prop 14, my answer to this is a no. And the reason it's a no is because we have seen over the past few decades that private enterprise has done a much better job at innovating than the government ever can. So we need to step back as the California state government and allow private enterprise to innovate when it comes to medical advancement. It's that simple.
Okay. And Isaac Bryan, your take on this, Proposition 14.
Yeah. My take is that, first of all, the innovation and privatization of people's medical care and medical care research puts a for-profit incentive on people's lives and livelihood. So that's a first response. And the government, the voters, the taxpayers, we have a responsibility to fund the research necessary to advance the quality of life for those who are suffering from terminal diseases. And so we need to fund this research, and I would vote yes on Prop 14. It's critically important that taxpayers and our civic responsibilities step up to make this a priority for us all.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question on probably each. Some of these I'll ask more than one because they seem to be more important in my opinion. Isaac Bryan, you say vote yes on Proposition 14. Go ahead and fund this research, and the public does have a responsibility. Some people that are giving us no on 14 say this was only, like the LA Times, this was only meant to be a temporary measure, to fund this kind of research, and that it was meant to be passed off to either the federal government or private companies, and that we've done enough already. How do you respond to that?
We've never done enough already when it comes to solving illnesses that we have not solved, right? And that's a public interest and a public health interest for everybody. And I definitely believe, even if this is not a permanent in perpetuity type of measure to fund this, there's a role for the federal government as well. And California often leads the nation in setting the foundation and groundwork for how our values should be prioritized in policy. So I think by taking this first step forward and then allowing the government and other interested parties to step up to also aid in this fight, that's a necessary thing for California to do. But I don't feel particularly strongly about this one, given all of the things on the ballot this year, but I would still support a yes.
And Errol Weber, my follow-up to you, many times private institutions, and we're seeing this with the whole COVID-19 vaccine conversation, really do put profits above people. And I've always found it odd that, the public pays for research and then the private big pharma companies are allowed to gouge us in prices for the very medications that we funded the research for. Isn't it better in some cases to actually put this in the hands of the public trust rather than just allowing corporations to profit off our health and well-being?
You just answered your own question by saying that the state has funded research in the past and then private companies have gouged us. Well, if you know in the past that the state has put forward taxpayer dollars towards research and then medical companies then rip us off with pricing, well, why would you want to rinse and repeat and do it again? Let private enterprise put the entire bill of it. instead of
or
having
alternately get
thing.
private enterprise out of the public health space, and let's have Medicare for all, and get to a place where we don't have to be pawns on a chessboard for people's profit. That's where I was going with it, actually, Mr. Weber.
Medicare for all leaves the door too wide open for massive levels of fraud, massive levels of exploitation, and massive levels of expensive bureaucracy.
Got it. So we only want that from corporations. We don't want that from government. Okay. So just to be clear, Mr. Weber is saying no on Prop 14. He wants to leave. He wants to leave research to private companies, and Mr. Bryant is saying yes on Prop 14. We have a responsibility to be part of the solution here. And we are going to keep it moving. Family, if you're confused about something, you are welcome to call and ask questions. It doesn't only have to be me, 520-KJLH, 520-5554. We've got guests a little, you could say Democratic or Republican, left, right, trying to give you a chance to have some perspective here. Proposition 15 increases funding for K through 12 public schools, community college, and local government by requiring that commercial and industrial real properties be taxed on current market value. So, Errol Weber, you brought up, Prop 13 back in 1978, which was meant to protect taxpayers, property taxpayers, individuals. Corporations got in on this, and corporations have been taking advantage of this tax loophole since 1978. You say this is needed to keep businesses in California? Is that your position?
I'm saying that Prop 15, which is currently on the ballot, needs to be voted no on, because this makes the door just wide enough for the state of California to just ram its foot through and then start finding new ways to tax us in the future. We cannot be so anti-business that we make it difficult for businesses already struggling here in California to run. We have been shutting down the state for half a year at this point. Many businesses are never coming back. And here we have this slap-in-the-face proposition, this measure that is essentially going to strip all commercial properties off the current tax roll, put it on a separate tax roll, and then tax them at the current market value. So some people's property taxes may shoot up. Maybe even more.
Not individuals, only corporations or manufacturers. What I will do, I'll allow you to say your opinion, but you don't get to say things that just aren't true. Unlike the presidential debates, I will do some fact checking.
So when I say some people's taxes are going to shoot up, some people, they run businesses. And they're
right. So by people, you mean corporations. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and, we'll get follow-up questions on each. I think Proposition 15 is very, very important. So we may spend a little bit more time on this. Isaac Bryan, Executive Director, UCLA's Black Policy Project. Your take on this?
It's an emphatic yes vote, right? We need to invest in schools and communities first. Commercial properties have been taking advantage of this loophole in our property tax code. Prop 15 was very intentional about splitting the role so that homeowners don't feel the weight of this. It's strictly for commercial properties. For example, Disneyland has been paying the same property tax rate since 1978, despite their incredible and immense growth. These companies that have benefited since 78 have a responsibility to pay their fair share. And Prop 15 does that, and it's very clear about how we invest that money back into schools and communities first. And so it's an emphatic yes for me. The idea that it's anti-business and that it requires everyone in California to pay their fair share, and especially commercial properties that have been benefiting from a tax loophole since 1978, is not anti-business. It's responsible. It's fair. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you talk, Mr. Weber, when you talk about businesses going out of business and staying out of business, that's happening in every single state. That's called COVID-19. That's not about property taxes or other taxes. Actually, when it comes to property taxes and certain other kinds of business responsibilities, like, taxing the oil that comes out of our ground, California can be a slacker. We are the only state in the union that doesn't tax corporations that suck up the public resource, which is, our oil. So, making businesses pay their fair share of taxes, making them pay a business a property tax based on 2020 rather than 1978. That doesn't sound unfriendly to business. It sounds like good, sound business practices on the part of the state on behalf of the people. Explain to me why that's wrong.
So, since you brought up Disneyland, let's talk about the 28,000 furloughed workers that Disneyland had to stop paying. And think about this for a second. 28,000, not 28 workers, 28,000.
Right, but that's based on COVID-19, not property taxes.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's absolutely reckless to then try to push a further property tax for commercial businesses right after COVID. Because the left thinks that COVID is going to be here forever and ever. And if you think that COVID is going to be here forever, why are you going to tax people half to death?
But since you don't, you'll be voting yes on 15, or I'm confused.
I'll be voting no on 15.
Got it. Okay. So my follow-up question here for Professor Brian, what about, this idea that, I guess I've been listening to the commercials, and it to me it seems like an outright lie. But what about this idea that this will impact homeowners? I'm hearing this a lot. I've heard from personal friends who say, they won't vote yes on 15 because they're afraid it will make their property taxes go up.
It's a lie, right? It's misinformation. This was very intentional about targeting commercial properties that have benefited from Prop 13 in a disproportionate way for far too long, since 1978. It's also irresponsible to link the economic crises we're experiencing during COVID-19 with tax incentives that have been unjustly given to large conglomerates and corporations in California that have a responsibility to pay their fair share when the economy bounces back from COVID-19. Everyone has hurt from COVID-19, right? Schools included. And this money needs to be reinvested into our schools that are largely funded by property taxes. And so we have to be mindful and thoughtful about this and not link things that are not directly and inherently related. It's a tough economy for all, but we need to lay the framework for the way our society should be when we bounce back, and we will bounce back.
Juliet called, and 1 second, I'll let you back in, but Juliet called. She couldn't stay on the phone, but she wanted to know if we would go over Proposition 20. Yes, we're going through all of the propositions one at a time. We have Republican Errol Weber on the phone with us. We have Isaac Bryan, who is, representing the left side of the coin here. I don't know. Are you a Democrat? I don't know if I should say that or not. But certainly executive director of UCLA's Black Policy Project. So you wanted to jump back in. Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
When you have a commercial property like an apartment complex, a multi-unit apartment complex, guess what? If you raise the property taxes on that commercial property, that business owner has to pass on that cost to the tenants. So you go, oh my gosh, it's only affecting commercial properties. Excuse me, that apartment you're living in is a commercial property, so your cost is going up. That supermarket that you
but that doesn't affect mom and property. But that's disingenuous, Mr. Weber, because it doesn't affect mom and pop property owners. No, it would only impact large corporate property owners, not mom and pop property owners.
Well, let's not put this emotional thing on it about mom and pop property owners. Look at the buildings in Los Angeles. They're not little 10-unit apartment complexes. We have 100, 200, 500-unit buildings in California. So all over LA. Now,
how many individual, whatever you want to call them, mom and pop, regular people, property owners own 500-unit buildings? I think that's a little over the top. Mr. Bryan, you want to respond?
I'm not talking about the business owners of those mom and pop commercial properties. I'm talking about the renters in those mom and pop commercial properties.
That's where rent control comes in. Yeah.
Mr. Weber has made an excellent point.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bryan.
The taxes on commercial properties,
it's a point.
It's going to be
the point has been made.
One moment, Mr. Weber. Go ahead, Mr. Bryan.
the point has been made that this could affect property owners who own, large unit buildings, and they would pass that cost on to renters. That is the greatest argument I've heard for rent control in the last few days. We need to think holistically about the way these policies intersect. And when we create a collateral consequence of one policy, we need to be mindful about those secondhand effects as we create additional policies. And it's a good thing rent control is also on the ballot.
So hold on.
Which of course is Proposition 21 as a sidebar. Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
Businesses exist to make money. That is the single role of a business. Everything else is ancillary. So here we have a state, and we have two people on the radio talking to me right now telling me that on one hand, we should put commercial properties on a separate tax roll and tax them half to death at current market value, even though they bought the property 1980 or 1976
That's how it works.
or 1990. And then on top of that, you want to do rent control. So you want to squeeze commercial properties from the top and from the bottom. You want to make it harder for them to make money. You want them to be taxed half to death during the middle of what the left will call a crisis. And then on top of that, you want to institute rent control.
Are you saying it's not a crisis, Mr. Weber? The pandemic is not a crisis? Is that the point you're making?
It is
okay.
overblown.
Okay, so then, so I don't want to go off on a sidebar, but I just wanted to be clear what you were saying. I'm not sure if you're attending the president's rally today at the White House, but I'll pray for you if you are. But I don't want to go off on a sidebar. So to be clear, Proposition 15 increases funding for K through 12 public schools, community colleges, and local governments by requiring commercial and industrial property, commercial and industrial only, to pay taxes based on the current tax rate of 2020 rather than 1978. If you vote yes, you want commercial properties, manufacturers, to pay current day taxes in order to fund schools. If you vote no, you want to leave things the way they are and allow corporations to continue to pay taxes based on 1978 assessments that went into place under Proposition 13. Just to be clear, Errol Weber, Republican congressional candidate,
no.
You're no on 15, and Isaac Bryan, you are a yes on 15.
An emphatic yes.
An emphatic yes. Okay. We are going to go
Just remember
on.
That money is not the solution to school.
Right, of course it isn't, unless you're rich and you're in a great school. Okay.
No, look at this.
No, you know what? We're going to, Mr. Weber, we're clear. You're no on 15. We're going to move to the next measure because remember what I said? We end up getting stuck on one and we never get through all of them. I've done too many elections to not to know better. Got to take a break right here. Anyway, we will continue with Isaac Bryan, UCLA, Executive Director of the Black Policy Project, and Errol Weber, who is a Republican candidate for Congress. It's Radio Free 102.3 KJLH, and we're broadcasting live from the 1-800 The Law 2 studio. Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.